So we covered Tiglath-Pileser. That's a fun name to say. He was under Ahaz arranged, protection with him, and he became tributary, therefore putting Judah, the southern kingdom, into tribute to Assyria. After him came Shalmaneser, and that was the last king of Israel, Hosea, the northern tribes that rebelled and paid for it dearly. Shalmaneser was put the northern kingdoms under siege, and in 724 that siege lasted for 2 years, and in 722 Israel is deported. The northern kingdoms, they're no more. That was because Assyria said, we're tired of you playing games with us, we're done. After him came Sargon. We talked about him last week in 722 to 705. In 713, Sargon goes against Egypt, the instigator of regional rebellion. Remember, Egypt saw it as their job to stir up trouble for everything from Israel north to Syria. They wanted that thing to be always in turmoil against Assyria, because that was their source of trade and income. So Assyria got wise and said, I know the problem's coming from down there in Egypt, we're going to handle that. So he's causing problems there. Hezekiah refused to go into alliance with Egypt and continued to pay his tribute that he had been in tribute to because of his father. The next one that shows up is Sennacherib. That's the son of Sargon, and he's going to rule from 705 to 681. Merodach-Baladan, you remember him, he was the one who was actually the king of Babylon, and he had come in there a couple of times and then run off when somebody would scare him, and then he'd come back and try to sit on the throne. He had been driven out in 708 by Sargon and decided to test the waters when Sennacherib came to the throne. So he returned to Babylon in 705. Okay, now he's going to sit back down. Babylon was a religious hub. It was considered sacred ground by both the Babylonians and any other pagan. They all reverenced it. It would be like the way people have this idea of the Vatican. Even nowadays, people who don't claim to be a Catholic think they have some sort of a reverence for the Vatican. Babylon held that same aura. Hezekiah in Jerusalem decides this is a good time for him to revolt too. Well, the regime change, you just got to expect it. They're all going to go try the reins. Now, Assyria's most famous battle, or who are we talking about? Sennacherib's most famous battle with Judah is going to happen under Hezekiah here. The Egyptians that were conquered by Sargon in 710 decide in 705 there's a new leader, let's try it. Try it one more time. And so 1 year after Sennacherib comes to power, in 704, Hezekiah becomes terminally ill. You remember the story. He's sick and he knows he's going to die. He's miraculously healed. That'll be found in Isaiah 38. With his new life extension of 15 years, Hezekiah seems to lose his proper estimation of God. Now you would think, look, I know I'm dying. It's obvious I'm dying. Everybody knows it. God grants him 15 more years. You would think those 15 years would be served in just total awe and reverence of God. But they're not. And we understand it. Because when we don't deserve good and God does us good anyway, it's not long till we act like a little spoiled brat. That's exactly what he does. Okay, so because he doesn't have the right view of God, reverence and thankfulness, in 703, Merodach-Baladan is looking for a friendly nation because he's sitting in Babylon and he shouldn't be there according to Assyria. He's been kicked out once before. So he goes to congratulate Hezekiah, thinking, okay, now I'll win overtures with them, and they're rebelling, and Egypt's going to rebel with them, and we'll all be in the same clique. So what's he do? He sends some presents and some ambassadors over there to pat Hezekiah on the back and say, we're just so glad you're still reigning, and long live the king, and we love you, and all that type of stuff. Well, this would have been a perfect time for Hezekiah to be a missionary. They're coming to his door. He should have told them, hey, let me tell you, I was going to die. There was no doubt about it. But my God healed me. And I'll guarantee you can write it down right now. I've got 15 years to live, and this is the God you need. He wasted opportunity. He should have done that, but he didn't. Isaiah 39, look at verse 1. Isaiah 39, verse 1. Isaiah 39, 1. At that time, Merodach-Baladan, the son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent letters and a present to Hezekiah, for he had heard that he had been sick and was recovered. And Hezekiah was glad of them, and showed them the house of his precious things, and silver and gold and spices and precious ointment, and all of the house of his armor, and all that was found in his treasures. There was nothing in the house, nor in all his dominion, that Hezekiah showed them not. Rather than praise God, Hezekiah gives them a guided tour of all of his wealth. Instead of saying, it's not about me, it's about God granted me extra life. God blessed me with life. He suddenly says, the thing that I know you esteem, I'll play the same game with you. You esteem gold and silver? Let me show you all mine. No, what they esteem is life. I mean, we boil it right down. That's what they were excited about. He was recovered, but he ignored that part. Isaiah informs Hezekiah that that was a bad move. You shouldn't have been playing show and tell. This is not the time to do that. Now think about it. Where we're sitting in history, the big bad bear that's tearing everybody up is who? Assyria. Evil, or not evil, but Merodach-Baladan is a nobody. He's timidly taking the throne at Babylon until Assyria comes and scares him off, and then he runs off to the marshes and hides. When he thinks it's safe, he comes back and sits on the throne. This is the guy that comes in from Babylon and says, good job, here's some presents. You know, we want to be your new best friend. And Isaiah tells him, the worst thing you could have done is shown Babylon what you have, because they're going to take it. Well, now, at the time, that wouldn't have rung true. Babylon was a nobody. They couldn't even sit a king on the throne when somebody decided to challenge it. So this really is something spectacular. God's telling him the future. Isaiah 39, verse 5. Isaiah 39, 5. Then said Isaiah to Hezekiah, hear the word of the Lord of hosts. Behold, the days come that all that is in thine house, and that which thy fathers have laid up in store until this day, shall be carried to Babylon. Nothing shall be left, saith the Lord. And thy sons that shall issue from thee, which thou shalt beget, shall they take away, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. Bad news. Then said Hezekiah unto Isaiah, you just got all this bad news. You made a big boo-boo, and because of that, you just condemned your kingdom to servitude and being exploited. Here's his response. Good is the word of the Lord, which thou hast spoken. Something sound a little off there? When people try to sound too pious, something's weird. The elevator's not going all the way up or something. He said, that's a great thing to say. You know, I just love the word of the Lord. Really? Here's what he loved. He said, moreover, for there shall be peace and truth in my days. That's right. It's all about me. It's all about me. You remember that history gives us a line that is the biggest farce that was ever said. Who was it? I'm trying to think of his name. Who says over there, goes from England to meet with Hitler and says he signed an agreement with Hitler. This predates Churchill, and says there will be peace in our time. No, there wasn't peace in his time. There ain't gonna be peace in this guy's time either. Although God's promised him he's gonna live for 15 years. Maybe by the end of that 15 years he'll wish he hadn't. Sometimes God's bad news isn't really that bad news. He could have just gone on to glory and escaped all the mess that's happening. Now I understand they didn't have the full revelation that we have. So for him, dying meant that's the end. They didn't really have a full understanding of what happens after the grave. They knew they were going to Abraham's bosom, but they didn't know much beyond that. They're looking for a physical kingdom on this earth and the Messiah to come sit on the throne. And his great regret here is, I'll not see the Lord in the land of the living. I'll go to my grave before he gets here. And that was, the thing that tore him up, to hear he's going to die. Well, now that's a good statement. However, he's very short-sighted. In 702, Sennacherib drives Merodach-Baladan once more from the throne. In 701, Sennacherib begins his Syrian campaign. Now, I don't know why they always call it a Syrian campaign. It's just the western seaboard. Because he starts in Syria and moves his way down to Egypt. And it seems like every Assyrian king has to do the same thing. They have to run west, beat those boys up. And then they do the same thing. They don't go north. They come over, go to Syria, come down to Egypt, go back up, and then they go to Turkey, because they're a bunch of turkeys. And then they go back to Nineveh. He captures Phoenicia, Syria, and many of the cities of Judah, then moves to lay siege to Lachish. Now, Lachish is south of Jerusalem, but north of Egypt. It's kind of a no man's land. Now, this was a smart move. Sennacherib was no dummy, and he was no sissy. So what he does is he says, I'm going to cut them off from Egypt, because Egypt and them have been, buddying up. So what he does is he skips over Jerusalem, runs down to the middle ground, captures that, and says now they won't come south and Egypt won't come north. Or if they do, they have to come alone, not together. So that's a smart move. Let's see, where did I finish up here? Laish does fall to Sennacherib, and that adds to the no man's land. Then he moves on Libnah. We find that in the Bible. Libnah's another town, and he's going to further this no man divide where they can't get together. And he's going to divide and conquer, literally, and that's what he's doing. In 701, Sennacherib takes Lachish. Hezekiah decides to pay tribute at that point, because that's getting too close to home. Now think about it. He did the right thing. Remember, he dug him a tunnel, made sure he was going to be able to get water in. Then he starts seeing, he's preparing for this whole thing all along. Then he starts seeing it actually happen. This was what he was preparing for. But now when it happens, he gets scared. Sennacherib is down there doing everything that he had imagined, Hezekiah had imagined he would. And now he's scared. So he rushes over there and says, maybe we skipped a payment or two. Let me give you a little extra. Here's an overdraft fee, and let's play like nothing ever happened and we're still buddies. Well, you don't mess with Sennacherib. And he'll take the money. And he does take the money. But it doesn't change his plans. He's already got his generals, orders are out there, and he's going to mop up the floor. Period. In 2 Kings 18. 2 Kings 18, verse 13. 2 Kings 18:13. Now in the 14th year of King Hezekiah did Sennacherib, king of Assyria, come up against all the fenced cities of Judah and took them. So he doesn't start in Jerusalem. That's the capital. But he starts in these outlying cities and starts taking them. Verse 14. And Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent to the king of Assyria to Laish, saying, I have offended, return from me. That which thou puttest on me will I bear. That is, if there's an extra fee I need to pay to make up for the years that we didn't get the mail delivered the right way, or what was it that Joe Patty or Frank Patty said? Oh, I made that check out to the IRS. It was just lost in my drawer somewhere.
Did you really say that?
That's what he said, yeah.
Oh.
And back to our Bible. And the king of Assyria appointed unto Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. He said, okay, I'll let you pay. Here's what you're going to pay. Verse 15. Hezekiah gave him all the silver that was found in the house of the Lord and in the treasuries of the king's house. Verse 16. And that time did Hezekiah cut off the gold from the doors of the temple of the Lord, and from the pillars which Hezekiah, king of Judah, had overlaid, and gave it to the king of Assyria. If ever you thought you did something wrong, you would have noticed it right there. The second you went to the temple, anything that was dedicated to God, and started chopping it up and sending it to an Assyrian, your mind has to be thinking, oh, this is not a good move. I've messed up here even farther than I've ever thought I messed up. But he did. He did it anyway. Well, in the south, in Egypt, Shebektu is ruler of the north. And even farther south of Ethiopia, it's Teharkin, or however you pronounce it. It's in Isaiah 37. The northern ruler of Egypt, Shebektu, he sends down to get some help from the Ethiopians. He says, I'm not going to be able to meet up with Judah the way I had envisioned. I better get some Ethiopians to come up here, and then the two of us will march north. Isaiah 37, verse 9. And he heard say concerning Teharkin, king of Ethiopia, he is come forth to make war with thee. And when he heard it, he sent messengers to Hezekiah, saying. So, Sennacherib hears that Ethiopians and the Egyptians are getting together. And in his mind, he says they're getting together because they're coming up here to help Hezekiah. And it's a coalition, everybody's against me, which he wasn't too far off. Verse 10. Thus shall you speak to Hezekiah, king of Judah, saying, Let not thy God, in whom thou trustest, deceive thee, saying, Jerusalem shall not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. So Sennacherib hears about this new coalition that's going on. It's building up reinforcements, and it's not going exactly the way he had envisioned. So what's he do? He sends his general over to talk to Hezekiah and scare some sense into him. His name is Rabshakeh, or Rabshakeh. And he sends him to Jerusalem to threaten them. They mock Jerusalem by saying Egypt is a vain thing to trust in. It's like a reed. If you lean on it, it'll go right through your hand. Now, there's a lot of truth in that. Egypt was cutthroat. They're not there to help you. If it helps them, they'll help you. But the second that's no longer needed, it's all about them. That's the world. Amen. Egypt is a picture of the world. They're only out for their own. He says, I could fight you with one hand tied behind my back. This is Sennacherib's taunt. I can fight you with one hand tied behind my back, blindfolded, and give you a head start. He gives him this line. He says, I'll give you 2,000 horses if you can find 2,000 men worth riding them. And even with that, the worst soldiers I got will mop the floor with you. He's egging them on. But it's more than just egging them on. He's scaring them to death. Sennacherib sends a letter to Hezekiah. Let's read his letter. 2 Kings 19. 2 Kings 19, verse 11. It says, Behold, thou hast heard what the kings of Assyria have done to all the lands by destroying them utterly. And shalt thou be delivered? Now, here he's taking the superiority position. He's not trying to reason with them as though they're equals. He's the scholar and the teacher, and he's given a lesson to Hezekiah. That's what he thinks. So it starts with history, verse 12. Have the gods of the nations delivered them which my fathers have destroyed, as Gozan and Haran and Rezpah and the children of Eden which were in Telassar? Where's the king of Hamath? You know, has anybody seen Jimmy Hoffa lately? The king of Arphad, the king of the city of Sepharvaim, of Hena, of Ivan. Okay, so I've given you some history. Now I'm going to give you a little mystery. And just sit down and let me teach you. Verse 14. And Hezekiah received the letter of the hand of the messengers and read it. And Hezekiah went up unto the house of the Lord and spread it before the Lord. Now here's the greatest spot in all this story right here. This. Hezekiah has messed up, done right, messed up. Guess what? That's you and me. You just think about your life and that's it. You've done right, you've messed up. Then you've done right, you turned around, you messed up again. This week? Probably today. Now, isn't it great that God always steps in to help us idiots? And that's what he's going to do here. And he's going to help him in a way that is just mind-blowing. In fact, it's so supernatural and miraculous that history can't figure it out. It's wild. Look, where did we stop? Look at verse 15. And Hezekiah prayed before the Lord, and said, O Lord God of Israel, which dwelleth between the cherubims, thou art God, even thou alone, of all the kingdoms of the earth. Thou hast made heaven and earth. So he threw the history and the mystery right out the window and said, I'm going straight to majesty, the one who's really ruling. Verse 16. Lord, bow down thine ear and hear. Open, Lord, thine eyes and see, and hear the words of Sennacherib, which hath sent him to reproach the living God. He's asking for mercy. But he makes it, this is what we have to do. You have to make it about God. Because in reality, if something comes against you, it can't come against you. If you're a child of God, it's coming against the child of God. If it's just flesh, then get over it. But here it was an arm of flesh, but it was going to enslave the children of God. So when flesh threatens to enslave you, and it's going to offend the holy God that's in you, the Spirit of God, then go before God and say, something's trying to beat you up. Your kingdom's being threatened. Beat them up. Sick them. Sennacherib's army is destroyed. This is an amazing thing. 2 Kings 19. 2 Kings 19, verse 32. Therefore, thus saith the Lord concerning the king of Assyria, he shall not come unto this city, nor shoot an arrow there, nor come before it with shield, nor cast a bank against it. Now, a bank, when he says cast a bank, that's how they would siege a city. They would build up earth, and you can see it if you just do a Google on it. Ancient siege sites, and you'll see they're still there, big earthen works. In fact, that's how they got into the big fortress out there south of Israel. I can't think of names tonight. What? Mecca? Yeah. The one that's way up on top? Yes. That's how they did that one. Was they built earthen works all the way up to it. And
they found out that they had committed suicide, or is that the one you're talking about?
Yep. Yeah, that's the one. And so that's what he was going to do here. He was going to siege them, and then he was going to build some earthen works to get over the walls. And God says, don't worry about it. He won't do it. It might be on the plans, and he may have called in all the engineers and gave them a contract, but it's not going to work. Verse 33. By the way that he came, by the same shall he return, and shall not come into this city, saith the Lord. So, good thing Hezekiah decided to go direct to God this time instead of trying to cook up a plan. I think he was kind of forced to. He couldn't get to the Egyptians. The northern territories had already been dispersed by Assyria. The only thing left was God. Now, that's a good thing. Sometimes God puts us in those positions where He's the only choice we have. That's not time to get scared and say, well, I can't go to Him because, it looks like I'm just doing it because I'm put in this hard spot. No, there's a reason you're put in that hard spot. He wants you to go to Him. And He does something right here. Look at verse 34. For I will defend this city to save it, for mine own sake and for my servant David's sake. And it shall come to pass that that night that the angel of the Lord went out and smote in the camp of Assyria, of the Assyrians, 185,000. That's a whole lot of slewing. Cold slawing everywhere. In one night. That's getting with it. After the colon there. And when they arose early in the morning, behold, they were all dead corpses. How did they arose if they were dead? Okay, so the ones who could still arise saw, this is a graveyard out here, and it's spooky in a graveyard. Let's go to the house. Verse 36. So Sennacherib, king of Assyria, departed and went and returned and dwelt at Nineveh. And then maybe next week we'll finish that chapter where his sons finish him off. Okay, let's see what history says. History is going to tell us this story, and it's great because we actually have a report from Sennacherib of this event. He writes it. Now, the Assyrians love to do that. They love to do, their own fake news media. And they did. They reported any campaigns they were in and the battles they won. And, of course, it's done with a prejudice toward themselves. They're going to say it so that their people have more trust in them. Here's what he says. You can find this. It's a post. It's a 6-sided post that's in the British Museum. You can look it up online and see it. Let's see, does it have a name? Sennacherib's Prism is what it's called. Okay, here's what he says. Because Hezekiah, king of Judah, would not submit to my yoke, I came up against him by force of arms and by the might of my power. I took 46 of his strong fenced cities. That's true. He's kind of going to twist things and put his own order to it. But I shut up Jerusalem, his capital city, like a bird in a cage. Then upon Hezekiah there fell a fear of the power of my arms. How would he know that? And he sent out to me the chiefest of the elders, with 30 talents of gold and 800 talents of silver and diverse treasures. All these things were brought to me at Nineveh, the seat of my government. The end. Tell us why the siege didn't continue. Tell us what happened to your army. How about those details? Yeah. Yeah, something needed a bigger stone or something. Yeah, but that's where it ends. That's all we need to know, according to him. How about Herodotus? Herodotus writes in 484 to 435 BC. So he's roughly 300 years after this event. Now he's going to get his information not as having the bias of being an Assyrian. So he's going to go try to be a historian, and he's not trying to spin in one direction or the other. He's just trying to write history. Now, here's the problem. There is no such thing as a history book that has no bias. The Bible is a history book, but it has a bias too. It's God. Okay, so Herodotus, where does he get his information? He gets his information from the Egyptians. He goes down, takes, 300-year-old descendants of the priests who were the historians of Egypt, and gets their information of what happened. Here's what they say. During the night, a horde of field mice gnawed quivers and bows and the handles of the shields, with the result that many were killed, fleeing unarmed the next day. You got to be kidding me. Yeah. A bunch of mice came in and chewed up all the bows. And it left all the food, didn't bother with that. But it chewed up all the bows and the bowstrings. And so the men woke up and they didn't know how to make new bowstrings or straps. And they just ran for the hills.
Egyptian mice.
Yeah. Right.
Years ago.
Yes. Okay, well, that's one spin. They know something happened. They're trying to put human reason to it. That doesn't seem very reasonable to me. But to the Egyptians, that sounded like a good story. It could have happened that way. No, I don't think so. Yeah. How about Josephus? Josephus writes 37 to 100 AD after Christ. And here's what he says. When Sennacherib returned to Jerusalem from his war with Egypt, he found there the force under Rabshakeh in danger from a plague, for God had visited a pestilent sickness upon his army. And on the first night of the siege, 185,000 men had perished with their commanders and officers. Okay, getting a little closer to the truth, but still not there. It wasn't a pestilence or a sickness that had taken on. It was something that happened in one night. In fact, it shocked the boys who woke up the next morning because they had no idea these guys were all going to be dead. They went to bed one night. See you in the morning, buddy. We're going to take this city. Wake up the next morning and Joe's not there. So it was scary. But they don't understand what happened. Well, what happened was God happened. Hezekiah had run to God and said, I got a problem I can't deal with. That's us. We got to do that. When life happens and we got a problem we can't deal with, run to him. And he can do things like this that are beyond human understanding. Beyond. Now, the event really happened. We have historical records to show that man can't figure out, but they do know something happened. God happened. And he will for us too. Now, the problem with all of these historians is the same problem Hezekiah had. They're getting excited. It's the same problem Hezekiah had. Remember, Hezekiah didn't give God glory for getting another 15 years. When God does something, he wants to hear, thank you. He wants everybody to praise him, not the thing he had mercy on. And so all of these historians miss the boat because they say this happened or that happened, or it was just sickness and, an out-of-town flu. And yeah, they breathed in something on the plane over there and they all got sick. No, it wasn't any of that. It was God. And so just like Hezekiah learned, anytime God does a miracle for us, and he does them all the time, then it's a good time to tell somebody. And just make sure that it's not a reflection of us, but a reflection of him. All right, that's our lesson for tonight.